3,540 meters. That is the distance at which a human being was killed by a single rifle round on the morning of 30 May, 2017, in the Panjwai district of Kandahar province, Afghanistan. 35 football pitches laid end to end. The bullet was in flight for just under 10 seconds. The shooter lay perfectly still, controlled his breathing, and trusted mathematics he had calculated in his head to translate into a body on the ground more than 2 miles away. The bullet did not miss. The previous record, held by British Army Corporal of Horse Craig Harrison, stood at 2,475 meters. This shot exceeded it by more than a full kilometer. Within hours, a senior American commander issued an order: "Get those Canadian snipers off that mountain." This is why. By 2017, now the NATO mission in Afghanistan had been running for 16 years. American troop presence had reduced from a peak of 100,000 to roughly 8,400. Officially, coalition forces were no longer leading combat operations, only training and advising the Afghan National Army. Officially. In reality, the Taliban had spent those years reconstituting with methodical patience, not destroyed, relocated, re-resourced, and returned. By 2017, they controlled or contested approximately 40% of Afghan territory, the highest figure since 2001. Kandahar province was under sustained pressure. Panjwai district was a consistent zone of lethal Taliban activity, a district where the organization had deep roots and robust freedom of movement. Into this environment, Canada placed a small element of its most capable soldiers. No public announcement. Was no political gesture, a practical contribution to a deteriorating campaign. The unit was Joint Task Force 2, JTF2, Canada's Tier 1 Special Operations Unit, formed in 1993, modeled on Britain's SAS and the American Delta Force. Headquartered at Dwyer Hill, 50 kilometers outside Ottawa. Publicly acknowledged strength between 300 and 600 operators. Precise figures classified. Their operational record spans Somalia, Bosnia, Haiti, Afghanistan, and Iraq. JTF2 does not advertise. Operators appear in photographs with faces blurred and insignia removed. The Canadian government has confirmed fewer than a dozen deployments publicly in the unit's entire history. Just the 2015 Iraq deployment became public only because French journalists photographed JTF2 operators near Mosul, at which point Canada was compelled to acknowledge what it had been quietly doing for months, invisible by design. And its sniper program is something else entirely. The Canadian Army's approach to long-range marksmanship did not emerge from doctrine alone. It emerged from geography. Canada is 9.98 million square kilometers of terrain, ranging from dense boreal forest to Arctic tundra to open prairie. Training for warfare in that environment means training for distance, cold, wind, and the kind of patience that operating in genuinely empty space demands. The Canadian Army Sniper School at CFB Meaford, Ontario, runs one of the longest and most technically demanding sniper qualification programs in NATO. Is measured not in weeks, but in months. Candidates who fail the stalking phase, in which a shooter must advance to within 200 meters of a trained observer across open terrain without being detected, are not recycled. Removed. By the time a candidate reaches the long-range marksmanship component, he has already demonstrated the ability to navigate under fire, produce accurate intelligence reports under exhaustion and stress, construct a concealed firing position, surviving scrutiny from 50 meters, and remain in that position without movement for periods extending to 72 hours. The weapon at the center of the program is the Macmillan TAC-50, a bolt-action anti-materiel precision rifle chambered in .50 BMG. The Browning machine gun cartridge, originally designed in 1921 for heavy machine gun use, The TAC-50 weighs 11.8 kilograms unloaded. Barrel length, 737 millimeters. At 1,000 meters, a trained shooter places 5 rounds within a group, measuring less than 25 centimeters across. The round leaves the muzzle at approximately 945 meters per second. At 3,540 meters, it still kills. But the weapon is only one component. What happened in Panjwai was not a feat of engineering. The rifle was available, the ammunition was available, the mathematics were available. What was not available to any other shooter in recorded human conflict was the combination of technical preparation, environmental reading, and psychological composure required to execute a firing solution at that range under field conditions. At 3,540 meters, the standard NATO external ballistics model breaks down. The drag coefficient of the round changes as velocity drops below the transonic threshold, the boundary between supersonic and subsonic flight, occurring at approximately 340 meters per second. Below that point, a projectile becomes aerodynamically unstable. Predicting its path requires modeling the precise moment it enters the transonic regime and the degree to which wind, temperature, and humidity affect its stability in the final 500 meters of flight. None of this can be solved perfectly, only approximated with extraordinary precision by a shooter who has spent years learning what the mathematics looks like when it becomes real air, real wind, and a target moving at 1.5 kilometers per hour at a range where the naked eye cannot distinguish an individual from the landscape behind him. The JTF-2 shooter was not on a controlled range. He was operating from a building approximately 3,540 meters from the target. Temperature, approximately 38 degrees Celsius. Heat shimmer distorting the air column between firing point and target. Atmospheric conditions at both ends differing across kilometers of variable terrain. According to reporting by Canadian defense journalist David Poulies, the shooter required multiple rounds to range the target. Earlier rounds landing short, fire walked progressively onto the position. The final confirmed kill round was fired at 3,540 meters. This is not a failure of technique. It is the technique. Walking fire to range, then delivering the kill round is the methodology. Taught, practiced, exactly what happened. Since the target was a member of ISIS-K, the Islamic State Khorasan province affiliate, operating in Panjwai and representing a direct and imminent threat to forces in the area. The engagement was confirmed through after-action intelligence analysis, video evidence, and the testimony of 2 witnesses present at the firing point. The Canadian Armed Forces confirmed the record, identifying the kill as occurring during a Special Operations Task Force mission and describing the engagement as legal under the applicable rules of engagement. Record confirmed. Then the order came. A senior American commander issued a directive. The Canadians were to be removed. The widely reported wording was unambiguous. Get those Canadian snipers off that mountain. The official explanation was jurisdictional. The Canadians had been operating in a sector assigned to American forces, a departure from the agreed operational boundary dividing coalition responsibilities in Kandahar province. The unofficial explanation, which circulates persistently among analysts of coalition special operations dynamics, is considerably more pointed. An American command structure that had spent 16 years in Afghanistan, operating the most sophisticated and expensive precision fire program in the world, had just been outshot, publicly, verifiably, and by a margin so extreme it constituted a categorical rather than incremental difference, by an ally whose entire national defense budget in 2017 was approximately 18.6 billion Canadian dollars. The United States defense budget that same year, $824 billion, a ratio of approximately 44-1. Or the Canadians had the longer shot. Return to that rooftop. At 3,540 meters, the target is not a figure. It is a pixel, a discoloration against the dust and scrub of the Panjwai landscape. With unaided vision, you would not see a person, a smear of movement against a gray-brown background. Nothing more. The shooter was prone, bipod mounted to the forend of the TAC-50, rear bag stabilizing the stock. In 38-degree heat shimmer shifting the apparent position of the target by several meters in the optic. He had a spotter. Two-man teams are standard in JTF-2 sniper operations. The spotter handles wind reading, target acquisition, and range confirmation. A division of cognitive labor allowing the shooter to maintain composure while environmental data is processed alongside him. Both men on that roof. In that heat. In position for a period neither the Canadian Armed Forces nor their allies have publicly disclosed. Hours, possibly. In JTF-2 doctrine, potentially days. First rounds confirmed the range. Adjustment made. Final solution calculated. Confirmed between shooter and spotter. Loaded into the firing sequence. Elevation adjusted on the scope turret. Windage correction applied. Body position locked. Trigger preloaded to its second stage. Breath out. Partial breath in. Hold. The natural respiratory pause. The moment between exhale and inhale when the body is momentarily, perfectly still. Squeeze. The round left the muzzle at 945 meters per second. Climbed. Reached apogee at approximately 1,700 meters. Began to descend. At approximately 2,800 meters, it crossed the transonic threshold. The moment aerodynamics became unpredictable, so the moment mathematics gave way to probability. Still descending, still carrying lethal energy, spinning at approximately 210,000 revolutions per minute from the rifling in the barrel. 9.8 seconds. The target went down. The Globe and Mail broke the story on June 22, 2017. Reporter Stephen Chase confirmed the engagement through video, call logs, and corroborating data. The Canadian Armed Forces issued a statement confirming the operation was within the legal framework of the mission mandate. The name of the shooter was withheld. It remains withheld today. Consider what it means to be the human being who made that shot, and to have your name removed from the record you just set. Craig Harrison gave interviews, wrote a book, appeared on television. His name is public because the British Army allowed it. JTF-2 does not operate on that calculus. The shooter who holds the record for the longest confirmed kill in human conflict may walk past you on a street in Ottawa. You would not know. He is not permitted to tell you. His colleagues are not permitted to tell you. The Canadian Armed Forces will confirm the shot. They will not confirm the man. Into that silence came the order. Get those Canadian snipers off that mountain. The phrase has a specific texture. It does not read like coordination language or administrative instruction. It reads like frustration, possibly embarrassment. The kind of sentence spoken in a briefing room when something has happened that was not supposed to happen. Not because it caused harm, but because it caused cognitive dissonance in a command structure that had spent decades investing in the premise that resources determine outcomes. The Canadians left. The operation continued. The record stood. 3,540 meters. We opened with that number. Sit with it again, now that you know what it cost to produce, not in dollars, in years. The shooter on that rooftop was not a product of a weapons program. He was a product of a selection process that removes 3 out of every 4 candidates. A training system that builds patience through repetition of discomfort. Hours in a hide, hours on a range, hours reading wind across landscapes that change every season. A sniper program operating quietly within a defense establishment the world routinely underestimates, or in a country routinely omitted from serious discussions of Western special operations capability. Canada's defense budget was not $824 billion, not remotely close. Americans outspend Canadians on defense at a ratio that renders direct comparison almost meaningless. And yet, on that rooftop, on that morning, at that range, the ratio of capability ran entirely in the other direction. This is not an argument that money does not matter. It does. Technology matters. Logistics matters. Sustaining a force in the field across 16 years requires institutional and financial resources that only the United States can provide at scale. None of that is diminished by Panjwai. But the record identifies something no appropriations committee and no procurement program can manufacture: the asymmetry between institutional investment and individual human capability, demonstrated with the precision of a single data point. Those two things are not the same, not close to the same. The order will be repeated in briefing rooms and lecture halls for decades, as a case study in coalition friction, in the politics of operational boundaries, in what happens when the assumption of resource superiority meets the reality of human excellence, what it will not be repeated, as is a story of Canadian failure. The Canadians left because they were ordered to leave. They left having fired the longest confirmed shot in the history of armed human conflict. They left having demonstrated, in a single round, that the relationship between investment and outcome is not linear. The record stood. The shooter returned to anonymity. The order became legend. There is a photograph that does not exist, not because it was never taken, but because the Canadian Armed Forces will not release it. No image of the shooter. No image of the rifle in position. No image of the rooftop. The documentation confirming the record is internal, classified, and unlikely to be released in full for decades, if ever. What exists is the number: 3,540 meters, a fact so clean and so extreme that no photograph could add to it. What also exists is the order: get those Canadian snipers off that mountain, obeyed, as orders are. What no order can remove is this: in the long and uncomfortable ledger of human conflict, in the record of what individual human beings have proven themselves capable of at the intersection of training, patience, mathematics, ire and nerve, a Canadian sniper, whose name you will never know, holds the outermost entry. Not famous, not publicly decorated, no television appearances, no book. He simply has the longest shot. And somewhere in the silence surrounding that number lives a lesson about the kind of capability that cannot be purchased, cannot be re-equipped, and cannot be ordered off any mountain. It can only be built. 1 year, 1 repetition, 1 breath, 1 squeeze at a time, 10 seconds of flight, a lifetime of preparation. The round arrived.